Hello, and welcome to the Quantum Fit Podcast. I'm Taylor, and I am your host. This podcast is all about applying the different principles of quantum physics and quantum biology to your health and fitness. This gives us a holistic view of how different environmental factors, such as sunlight or cold, play a major role in your overall health. So I won't just be talking about diet or exercise and developing good habits. If you want to really make lasting changes in how you feel, think, and act, then I'd recommend you try to listen closely and have an open mind to what I have to say. Every day I'll be hitting you with a quick 7 to 15 minute long podcast. I keep it short like this because it makes it both informative and to the point so that you don't feel quite so overwhelmed with information. Also, currently I do not do any kind of advertisements. So instead, I ask that you share this podcast with a friend or family member if you enjoyed the message and gained something from it. I want to be able to spread quality and easy to understand content that everyone can take and use in their own daily lives. I would highly appreciate it. On to today's podcast. Osteoporosis. Is it calcium? It's time to slay the paradigm that calcium has a damn to do with osteoporosis. I'm going to try to keep this episode a bit shorter too. Let's start off with the process of building and destroying bone. Keeping it simple, there are osteoblasts and osteoclasts. Osteoblasts are turned on by voltage spikes and will get to work building bone according to where voltage is located within the bone. This means areas of more voltage get thicker bone. If there's a lack of voltage, osteoclasts are turned on and begin eating away at bone. It's a necessary thing because we want optimally shaped bone for optimal movement. Plus, big bones are heavy too, and that can throw off biomechanics. Keep this voltage and bone building in mind as we move forward. It's very, very essential. Now, going back to, I had talked about Robert O'Becker's research before and referenced his book, Body Electric. So it's time to simplify a little bit in it when he's talking about bone. He found that bone has impurities in it that alter conduction along it. This is called doping, and it is extremely useful for increasing and decreasing voltage through different sections of a material. Materials engineers do this. So, they create, they may add whatever metals to a material to basically, they're experimenting to see how they can actually change how electrons travel across or through a material. It's used in electronics too. It can make electronics way, way, way more efficient. Now, bone is mostly made up of collagen and what's called hydroxyapatite, or simply calcium apatite, which is what gives it its almost mineral-like composition. But strategically placed throughout bone are trace minerals, the main one being copper. He was the very first one to find out that copper was the very thing that held collagen and apatite together. It does this electromagnetically. Okay, so the copper sits in there, which means that you need proper voltage and electromagnetism in order for the copper to stay there. That's also important. He also figured out that this, the copper being in there, it made bone one long stretch of different PN junctions or positive-negative junctions that, they would emit light when current ran through the bone. Basically, PN junctions, again, that's something that's used like in electronics. But basically, the way the bone works, it works like an LED. It's funny, Robert O'Becker, he basically discovered LEDs decades before LEDs were invented. And he found it within nature, which is pretty damn interesting. Also, the copper being in the bone, found out it also makes bone conduct electrons at nearly 100% efficiency. Wild stuff. Now, let's bring back up a topic I talked about a couple weeks ago with bone. I said that bone is piezoelectric, meaning that it releases a bit of voltage when pressure is applied. Now, I mean, pressure is always being applied by gravity, right? But exercise will create massive tensions and generate much larger pressure and thus greater voltage than gravity ever could. This is part of the reason why certain types of training will lead to better overall bone structure for you fitness pros listening. Since copper is essential for connecting collagen and hydroxyapatite, or the calcium, together, and gives bone its ability to conduct electricity, this makes it the most important component for bone structure. Without it, bone will fall apart and or eat itself away. I mean, this completely destroys the argument that a lack of calcium is the main reason for bone withering away. In fact, I'd say it moves the target from being focused on calcium instead to a lack of copper and low voltage. I mean, really, what the hell does building more hydroxyapatite have to do with holding bone together? Yes, it's a part of the structure, but taking in more calcium won't help you if there's no voltage. It's a lost cause. To take a metaphor, it's like collagen. So in bone, collagen is a structure, it's the very basic foundation. It's scaffolding, all right? The calcium apatite, that sits on top of it. I mean, bone might be 70% made up of calcium apatite, but that doesn't mean it holds it together. It just sits on there, right? So, like if you were to have a bridge and it's, starting to fall apart, you don't think to start adding more concrete onto it in order to make it stronger, right? To rebuild it. It's like, oh my God, it's falling apart. Let's keep throwing on concrete. No, you're going to weigh it down and, it'll be a problem. It doesn't do anything, or it'll just, whatever. That's the way it is in the body. It just doesn't make any sense with bone, You can't just add on more of the calcium apatite and expect it to fix a problem. So that's why you can't be looking at calcium intake as a factor for osteoporosis. Again, I mean, as long as you're having you're eating some animal products, so you're getting enough calcium, you don't have to worry about it. Calcium isn't the problem. No, instead, you need to do things that promote greater voltage in your bones if you want to prevent osteoporosis. You also need to get as much copper from quality food sources as you possibly can, especially if you're a female, and even more so if you're planning on having any children. You know what has a shit ton of copper? All shellfish. And according to the different nutrition data that I've looked at, I mean, some of it's kind of hard to go through, and some of it, it varies a lot, but a lot of them seem to point to shrimp as being, like any kinds of shrimp, doesn't really matter, as being the absolute best source of copper, even better than oysters. And then, the other obvious thing the other obvious thing you should be doing is increasing your voltage. So, I've already talked about it many, many times throughout past episodes, what you need to do that. Sunlight, red light, cold exposure, low carb, high fat diet. Also, sauna can help too because of heat shock proteins. If you don't know all of this stuff, I highly encourage you to go back through my earlier episodes. All right, that's it for today, guys. If you have any questions and comments, find me on Instagram at Real Quantum Fit, my personal Facebook page, Taylor Kelson, and the brand new Quantum Fit Facebook page. Or you can send me a voice message across the Anchor app if you listen to me on there. See ya!